Trump abandons the Kurds.
But is it really that simple?
Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well,
what do we have today?
it's 2:29 in the morning.
It is.
You know, I posted the Ben Shapiro video when he was getting all gangsta up on Beto.
Yeah, I know.
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a audience-driven show. So the Beto video was done by an audience member. It was recommended by an audience member. Mm-hmm. And then we also had another audience member who was extremely emotional about what's going on at the border. And he then accused me of being heartless and not caring about the good people over there in Syria. And then he trotted out the term genocide. So what this brother is saying is that because we withdrew 1,000 troops, a genocide is taking place. Now, dear listener, at Middle America, all we care about is the facts. We don't really traffic a lot in emotions unless the emotions are based on fact.
Right.
Now,
right.
If it is in fact true that a genocide is occurring, then that is something that we ought to look at very deeply. Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we looked at all the information, we looked at the data, and we also looked at Arab sources, such as Al Jazeera, among others.
Yep.
Because they sometimes have a different perspective than American media. And the facts are, I would assume that an Arab news outlet would be a bit closer to the situation than an American one. Would you agree?
I would, yes.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of these sources and see if we can come up with a picture and see if it's true that my dear friend is right, that a genocide is happening and Americans are just terrible, horrible people for being happy about the fact that we're withdrawing troops from the Middle East. You know, it's a strange world that we're in. Sorry, I got to tell you. Here is Donald Trump's tweet about his justification for pulling out the troops. He says, the United States has spent $8 trillion, all caps, fighting and policing in the Middle East. Thousands of our great soldiers have died or been badly wounded. Millions of people have died on the other side. Going into the Middle East is the worst decision ever made, all caps, in the history of our country, all caps. We went to war under a false and now disproven premise. Weapons of mass destruction, all caps. There were none, all caps. Now we are slowly and carefully bringing our great soldiers and military home. Our focus is on the big picture, all caps. The USA is greater than ever before. Now, what's strange to me is this seems like a Bernie Sanders talking point. Mm-hmm. What Mr. Trump said for 2/3 of what, I mean, the aside from the American, rah-rah stuff, which most leftists will not do, because I guess it's not cool to love your country, but this seems like a leftist talking point, and as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was a leftist talking point. I don't know if you remember, dear listener, Jay-Z's little freestyle, no more war, no more Iraq, we're all coming home, our president is black.
No more war, no more Iraq, no more white lies, the president is black.
You remember that? That was a big thing. Wasn't Obama running on this idea that we need to get out of the Middle East?
Yeah.
The big homie Tulsi Gabbard was telling us we need to end all these ridiculous regime change wars and get our folks out of the Middle East, that we're experiencing combat fatigue, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And here we are in 2019, and I cannot help but think that the only reason that leftists are losing their minds and all of a sudden have developed this love and care and concern for Kurds is because Mr. Donald Trump is the one to pull out the troops. to me, the inconsistency is maddening. And I'm not sure. But now, look, on an individual level, maybe my friend who went off on me in the comment section, maybe he's had a deep love for Kurdish people. Now, I've talked to this brother on multiple occasions for extended periods of time, recorded even, and I've never heard a word about these people.
Right, nor have I.
Now, just as an aside, there are many civilian members who, during the height of the conflict about a year and a half ago,
Yep.
were doing that jihad tourism.
Yep.
So you know how to get to me, brother. And I'm being dead serious. I can get you a kalesh, and you can go and fight alongside your brethren, if you're that concerned. But I digress. Look, this is a left-wing talking point. What Trump just said. Yeah, $8 trillion fighting in the Middle East. I mean, that could help us with Medicare for all.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good kickstart. Now, he says millions of people have died on the other side. I don't know if that number is exactly accurate. You know, there was that big kerfluffle between Sam Harris and Abby, I think her name is Martin, where Abby Martin was saying we killed 1 million civvies, and Sam Harris was saying, no, we only killed like 500,000 civvies. He just completely dispense with human life.
Well, yeah, but either way, whether it's 1 million or 500,000, he said millions of people. He didn't say cities.
Correct.
So
Correct.
if there was 500,000 civilians, how many other people on top of that?
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it was up there.
I'm just looking at Jason Haber here. ISIS is going to return. The Kurds will be slaughtered. The region will be destabilized. Jason Haber. Let me see who he is. Maybe he's a political analyst. No, he's a real estate guy. This is one of the things that's happening in 2019. It's called Dunning-Kruger syndrome, where people who have no expertise or training in a given field whatsoever, all of a sudden believe that they can make these pronouncements, and now all of a sudden have become experts in the field.
Yeah.
Sir, how do you know? Anyway, Vin does not have Dunning-Kruger syndrome, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to defer to what the experts say, and we'll make our decisions from there. Okay, so this is Al Jazeera. Now, Al Jazeera after 9/11 was an entire group that was sort of blacklisted as a terrorist news outlet because Al Jazeera dared to show the ramifications of our bombings on TV. So while we were showing American citizens jumping off of buildings to escape the flames in the World Trade Center, that was okay. But when Al Jazeera was showing the fallout of the kid missing half of his head because we bombed the hell out of his little village, that was fomenting terrorism. This is Al Jazeera. Okay. So here's Al Jazeera, and by the way, if you haven't noticed the timestamp on this video, this is going to be a very long one because it's a very important topic, and we don't want to speak from emotion, we want to speak from fact. Okay, so here we go, here's Al Jazeera.
Hey guys, I'm Sana, this is AJ Plus, and this Sunday I want to talk about why making a Kurdish state happen is going to be tough. So the Kurds have been getting a lot of international attention in the last few years because of their role in the conflicts in Iraq and Syria. Kurdish militias have been battling ISIS, Syrian rebels, the Iraqi and Syrian governments to stake claim to land and to also protect Kurdish communities. And in October 2017, Kurds in Iraqi Kurdistan took part in a referendum in which 93% of those who voted chose independence. But the Iraqi government called the referendum illegal and non-binding. And while a referendum was considered a big moment in Kurdish political history, what happened in Iraqi Kurdistan didn't necessarily represent the direction of all Kurdish people. And Deniz Akici, a lecturer at UC Berkeley, breaks down why that's the case.
There is no single Kurdish independence movement. After the World War I, Kurdistan was divided into 4 nation states: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria.
So with that, let's roll back a bit and look at how the Kurds have ended up where they are today. The Kurds are the fourth largest ethnic group in the region and make up sizable minority populations across Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Turkey. Despite having big numbers, they didn't get their own state after the fall of the Ottoman Empire when the United Kingdom and France were busy carving up the region. The infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement split the Ottoman Empire into nation-states, but it didn't really care about how ethnically diverse the region actually was. The Kurds, left out of Sykes-Picot, had negotiated their own state under the Treaty of Sèvres, but that didn't work out. The treaty was supposed to split modern-day Turkey into different zones, including one for the Kurds. But it wasn't ratified thanks to when Turkish nationalists led by Kemal Atatürk, Turkey's first president, recaptured all of modern Turkey from the Europeans. Fast forward to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s when we start seeing countries across the region gain independence from European colonialism. A huge part of pushing back against European colonialism was the cultivation of various nationalisms, Pan-Arabism for instance, Turkey's Kemalism, or Iranian nationalism. All of this meant that Kurdish sovereignty was either not a priority for Pan-Arabist leaders in Iraq and Syria, or was a threat for Kemalist Turkey and for Iran. That meant that over the 20th century, the Kurds across these four countries saw a lot of marginalization. There was displacement, political repression, loss of rights, and massacres.
So, what we have is, once again, European nations carving up the Middle East, telling people where their land is,
Yep.
and fomenting absolute total discord, discontent, and destruction and death. Which is almost literally the same thing that is happening with the Palestinian and Israeli conflict right now, which to this moment, Palestinians do not have a state and they're basically trapped in Gaza, etc. So the immediate question that I have is, why in the world is it the job of the United States? Now, keep in mind, this is 1,000 troops. Now, Mr. Trump, I believe, is deploying about 2,000 troops to Saudi Arabia, and we're probably going to have to do another special on that because the Saudis are committing serious war crimes in Yemen. That's a separate subject because right now what we're dealing with Syria. But why in the world is it our obligation as America to keep 1,000 of our troops there when it's the UK and France that created this quagmire in the first place?
Yeah.
Does Europe hold any accountability whatsoever, or is the United States supposed to be the world police? Now again, if there's genocide happening, as my friend said,
Yeah.
then I would love for the U.S. to be part of being able to say we quelled a genocide. But right off the gate, before we even start talking about genocide, sir, why in the world is it why is everybody going after Trump? This is a thing that kills me about the world, the left. And I have to say that there are a lot of right-wingers that don't like this either. Because right-wingers love their war. They love them some war. So what's interesting to me is nobody's questioning Trump's motivation on this. If your own party is telling you, no, we need to stay there, and the leftists, no matter what Trump does, Trump could feed 70,000 homeless people. They'd be like, oh, they were white though. Right? They're not going to rationally deduce what Trump is doing here. But I just have to ask, if this is France. Now look, I know for a fact that France has some very, very capable warriors. Believe you me. France has some very, very capable warriors. And so I don't understand why the European Union, seeing as how their fathers are the ones that created this problem, why is it Donald Trump's and the American soldiers' job to solve it?
Yeah.
It's a serious question. I'd like to know. I'd like to know why we're being, but that anybody who's happy that a U.S. soldier is being taken out of harm's way, we've got a war apparatus that's been hot for, since 01. I mean, before 01, but really hot since 01 on a consistent basis without much reprieve. Why are Americans supposed to feel guilty about the fact that we're slowly starting to get out of the Middle East? Why are we being accused of fomenting genocide when it's the Europeans that created the situation? I'd like to know.
Yep.
Secondly, these group of people do not seem to be these hapless people who, I mean, they had elections. Now, it says Kurdistan. Kurdistan is a political entity within Iraq. So you've got Kurds who are saying, this area is Kurdistan. And then they had a vote within their own area, within a sovereign state, to say, we are independent of Iraq.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the Iraqi president said, what the hell are you talking? What do you mean
Yeah.
you're...
No.
This is Iraq. There's no Kurdistan. Nobody agree. Where did this come from? You know, we kind of had a similar issue in the United States. Do you remember?
Did it have to do with Texas?
It's called a civil war.
Oh, wait.
Where you had states within states saying that, oh, okay, we're going to secede from you. We're our own thing.
What wasn't there? Didn't that happen when Trump was getting in? People were saying there was something then.
The Californians were going to secede from the Union, and then when Obama was there, the Texans were going to secede.
Okay,
that wasn't really serious. But during the American Civil War, the South was serious. They had enough votes, and they all decided that they were going to be their own Confederate. That's what the Confederate means. It's they had a confederation of states who wanted to secede from the Union. And America didn't. What it was, we had 600,000 dead bodies by the end of it. So I understand why the Iraqi prime minister said, no, this is a legal vote. We're not going to honor it. What are you talking about? I get it. I understand. I'm not saying it's right or wrong because it's really none of my business. I'm just saying I get from their perspective that they have a bunch of numbers there, so they're saying, hey, let's have our own thing here. And I also understand the Iraqi governor perspective saying, what the hell are you talking about? You can't do that.
Yeah.
I understand both of them.
Yeah.
But make no mistake, these to me do not look like people who are just hapless victims.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look, if you're gonna try out the term genocide, then you're thinking about the Rwandan genocide or the what happened to our Jewish friends in Nazi Germany. And I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can help me. But after Kristallnacht, did a bunch of Jews get together and vote 93% to create a Jewish faction in Germany? No. Oh, that's right. The Germans put them all in ghettos and sent them over there before they trained them over to Auschwitz. So to use this type of language is not very helpful to your argument, because now I'm looking and these dudes they've got their own self-ordained president. They had votes.
Didn't they have their own military?
They had
like that too?
They had votes for themselves and all of that. Doesn't look like a genocide to me, but let's continue.
And it's not as though the Kurds didn't resist the repression. Time and time again, they did. Now, the brunt of the state violence faced by Kurds was in Turkey and Iraq. In Turkey, the government forcibly displaced over 1 million Kurds after several Kurdish revolts in the 1920s and 30s. Kurdish language and culture was banned, and violence against the Kurdish population, including torture and destruction of villages, was widespread.
Okay, so 1 million of them were displaced by Turkey after, according to her, multiple revolts from Kurds. So, she said it's not like they didn't fight back. They obviously did, and they fought back so much so that the Kurdish government said, the Turkish government said, okay, you guys, all right, you're out. See ya. Now again, I wasn't there. I'm seeing an 8-minute clip from Al Jazeera. I wasn't there. Well, all I know, if this is correct, is that there were a bunch of skirmishes, and finally the Turks said, all right, you guys, you're out of here. See you later. That's what I got. And these guys are very capable fighters. Now, I know for a fact that these guys are very capable fighters. The term Peshmerga means those who run toward death. That's what Peshmerga means.
Jeez.
So these dudes are these guys are very capable
and what
fighters.
Is that? What is Peshmerga in relation to Kush? I'm Kurd. The Kurds.
That's their military. They're based in Kurdistan in Iraq.
Okay.
When the Iraqi troops were running, and when they were just laying down and letting ISIS just mow them down with AK-47s, you don't see videos like that of Kurdish soldiers, because they don't do that. They fight very hard and very brutally. A lot of respect for those guys. So this idea that the Kurds are just these, you know, but the point is well taken. The Turks, I'm sure, did not treat them well as they were telling them to leave their country. For sure.
Kurds in Iraq saw the height of state repression in the late 80s and early 90s. Under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi government oversaw several massacres of Kurdish civilians during the Iran-Iraq War. The government accused Kurdish fighters along the Iranian border of assisting the Iranians and led what was called the Unfall campaign. It lasted 2 years and claimed thousands of Kurdish lives by the end of the 1980s. Iraq in the 90s saw the first Gulf War, a Kurdish civil war, and hundreds of thousands of Iraqi deaths as a result of the international sanctions.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's kind of when I kind of became conscious of all this stuff, specifically in the first Gulf War. But a lot of people don't realize this, but I forgot who it was that kind of really brought to my attention. But sanctions are an act of a war, almost more brutal than you know, firing a weapon. I mean, you basically starve people out. I mean, a lot of people don't know this. It's not just food, but a lot of it, medicine, things like that. Like, it's a cruel and unusual and inhumane thing to do, and you know, it's supposed to be an alternative to bloodshed, but if a person dies because of lack of food and medicine, you still have blood on your hands.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's just technicalities that these governments play with words that you know, the normal populace, it doesn't matter, America, Europe, whatever, they go, oh, okay, we're not killing, we're just sanctions, okay, and then you just go on with your day. No, like, it's almost a more welcome death to die in an act of war than to die, you know, you're seeing this woman here.
God, just... with a baby.
You know,
oh my gosh!
And it's a terrible thing. You kind of gotta watch, and it's torturous, and it's a terrible thing. Sanctions are, you know. So it's not what people think. It's an act of war, and I think that's why Al Jazeera is important, because you see the consequences of this. Now, they're not specifically blaming America here. They're saying the UN, but like, this is stuff that you don't see in American media. You don't really see the fallout of sanctions.
Yeah.
It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
But we continue on.
2000s, where there was the American invasion of Iraq. So that brings us now to today, a push for Kurdish independence and the resistance to it. Iraqi Kurdish journalist Abdullah Hawais told me how it's important to think of Kurdistan as more than just a political aspiration.
So the idea of having a Kurdish state is not only a political dream, it's actually part of the culture of Kurds. It's part of their identity. They have been raised with thinking that Kurds deserve a state.
So who's standing in the way? Let's start with Turkey and Iran.
Iran and Turkey are very much against the establishment of a Kurdish state, even outside of their borders, because they fear that if there is a Kurdish political entity anywhere in the Middle East, this would threaten the so-called national unity of these two countries.
Turkey considers groups like the PKK, aka the Kurdistan Workers' Party, to be terrorist groups and threats to national security. Turkey also fears an independent Kurdish state in Iraq would be used as a base for the PKK to launch attacks on the Turkish military and civilian populations.
Okay, so Turkey considers the PKK to be a terrorist organization, is what this young lady said. Okay. So I did some research on the PKK. Here is what the United States Department of State is saying about the PKK.
Oh, in the early 1990s, the PKK moved beyond rule-based insurgent activities to include urban terrorism. Anatolia became the scene of significant violence, with some estimates suggesting at least 40,000 casualties. Following his capture in 1999, Öcalan announced...
That's the leader of the PKK.
announced a peace initiative ordering members to refrain from violence and requesting dialogue with Ankara on Kurdish issues. Öcalan's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He remains the symbolic leader of the group. The PKK forswore violence until June 2004, when its hardline militant wing took control and renounced the self-imposed ceasefire of the previous 5 years. Striking over the border from bases within Iraq, the PKK engaged in terrorist acts in eastern and western Turkey. In 2009, the Turkish government and the PKK resumed peace negotiations, but talks broke down after the PKK carried out an attack in July of 2011 that left 13 Turkish soldiers dead. In 2012, the PKK claimed responsibility for multiple car bombings, resulting in the deaths of at least 10 people. Primary targets included Turkish government security forces, local Turkish officials, and villagers who oppose the organization in Turkey. Between January and mid-July 2015, the PKK carried out small-scale armed attacks against Turkey's security forces and military bases. A ceasefire negotiated between 2012 and 2014 ended in July of 2015 when the PKK killed 2 security personnel. During 2016, the PKK continued its terrorist activity in Turkey. Turkish officials blamed the PKK for the August 17 vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, VBIED, attack at a police station in the province of Van, which killed 4 and wounded 72. The PKK also claimed an August 26 VBIED strike against the Sirnak police headquarters, which killed 11 and wounded more than 70.
That was published by the United States Department of State, 19 July 2017. Okay? So, it is true that Turkey considers them a terrorist group.
Organization. Yeah, a little group there.
Now, keep in mind, Turkey is not saying all Kurds are terrorists. Turkey is saying the PKK are terrorists.
Yeah.
And there is no way that if this is true, and this is from the United States State Department, if this is true, there is no way in the world to say that these people are not terrorists. It's not just Turkey saying it. In 1997, Bill Clinton, William Jefferson himself, declared these people to be a terrorist organization, and so did the European Union. So this is not just Turkey saying that these people are terrorists. The United States said that they were terrorists. And then they went to list the atrocities that these people committed. They had targeted killings of government officials. They also killed villagers who opposed their ideology, etc., etc. So it makes sense that Turkey would say, no, we don't want you to have an actual Kurdish state because you got these PKK people running around, and now we're going to have to legitimize these people. They're not crazy. This is not crazy. But I'd also like to point out for the experts, my friend the real estate agent who said that Kurds are going to be slaughtered. Really? These don't sound like people who just sit back and get slaughtered to me. These are people who are a minority group who took on an entire nation.
Yep.
These are not people who are scared for their lives.
No, and they're not people that try to respect anything that's trying to be like a pact that's worked out between two parties.
Correct.
Because this continued to happen. Anytime that there was a peace treaty or peace act or whatever you call them, organized between the two of them.
Correct.
They went back on it with violence.
Correct. And this Öcalan guy who started the entire organization, they commuted his death sentence. They didn't kill him. And so they're showing good faith. Now again, we're not in that region.
Right.
And there's multiple sides to every story. But this idea that these people are just, we can't do, come on y'all.
Yeah.
We know what this is. Would we tolerate something like that? You know what's really crazy to me? These people, you know, these people who love to crow about how we deserve 9/11 and all the rest of it, would never think to put themselves in any real danger. The idiot from TYT and the other silly people who say that we deserve 9/11 are not the type of individuals who would ever put themselves in real danger. I mean, the guy didn't even have enough manhood to take complete accountability for what he did on the show. He tried to blame it on the fact that English was his second language. These are the type of people that we're dealing with. So they want Turkey to deal with this type of stuff, but they want to sit comfortably behind their computers
Nobody
talking
fell
about
for
these
it.
people. Stop it. Stop it. Now look, whether or not, what these guys' beef was, again, this happened in the 20s. They carved up the land. Then the French and the UK did not have enough motivations to hold that land and hold down the treaty to give the Kurds their land. And it resulted in an actual genocide, actually. The Armenian genocide is an actual genocide. Where people are getting crucified and stuff. That was an actual genocide. This is not. The word means something.
Turkish nationalists see Kurdish aspirations inside its borders and outside as a threat to, Turkish state identity. Remember I mentioned how back in the 1930s, Kurds were barred in Turkey from speaking their own language and practicing their own culture? Well, it was only in 2012 that they were allowed to teach their own language and culture in private schools. Then there's Iran. Iran also has no interest in seeing an independent Kurdish state, given its own Kurdish population in the country's northwest, as well as its relationship with Iraq. Currently, Iran has very close relations with the Iraqi government, seeing it as a buffer between itself and hostile regional neighbors. A Kurdish state that would be seen as friendly to the United States and Israel isn't exactly the most tantalizing thought for the Iranians. Then we've got Iraq and Syria, both embroiled in conflict. Following the Kurdish referendum, the Iraqi government responded by launching an offensive to take the city of Kirkuk, which had been under Kurdish control since 2014. Huwais, by the way, says that Kirkuk is central to Kurdish statehood.
Kirkuk is considered a vital part of any Kurdish project for statehood, not only because of its wealth and its oil, which is actually very important for any Kurdish state, especially economically, but also historically, Kurds think without Kirkuk, a Kurdish state would be very poor, even culturally.
Then there's Syria, where Kurds have seen some reforms in recent years.
So let me get this straight. The Kurds do this referendum, 93% of them say, we want to carve out Kurdistan inside of Iraq.
I don't know how they thought that was going to be.
The Iraqi president says no. And then he marches to Kirkuk, which is basically their psychological and economic capital, and takes it.
Yep. He was sending them a message, a very clear one.
Well, look, man. The Iranians and the Iraqis, now when I came to this country, of course I didn't know, I was a kid, but the Iranians and the Iraqis were going at each other. And that's where Mr. Hussein got all his chemical weapons and such, because we took a side and we helped the Iraqis. So these guys have been at each other's throat.
Oh yeah.
So now these two are experiencing a sliver of peace.
Yep.
And now they're like, now you want to go and create another state which is now loyal to Israel and America? And we just got a sliver of peace between Iraq and Iran?
Yeah.
No. You saying no?
This is gonna sound really terrible, but I don't know a whole lot about the politics of Iraq and Iran, but they don't seem like the type of people that are okay with you just put up a vote in the majority. You know what I'm saying? It's not America. In America, people go sign papers to have let's bring it back to the vote of the people. But how could they have thought that was going to work over there?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the international community, you've got the vote and democracy, and the Western world loves democracy. So I think some of it was sort of like a gamble of let's see what the international community says about this. But the facts are nobody in the international community wants a Kurdistan. Nobody, except for the Kurds. I mean, this is tragic stuff. But here's the Council on Foreign Relations. This is a global conflict tracker. It was last updated 11 October 2019. And look what it says at the very end when it's talking about this conflict between the Kurds in Turkey and if the Kurds do succeed in establishing an independent state in Syria amid the chaos gripping the region, it would accelerate secessionist movements in other Kurdish areas of the Middle East. Heightened terrorist activity by Kurdish separatists is also a growing concern for the United States and its allies, which designated, here we go again, the PKK a foreign terrorist organization circa 1997. Okay? So there are a lot of complexities to this. Now, the question has to be asked, if it wasn't for these terrorist bastards who are going around killing government officials and innocent civilians,
I know.
would people be more amenable to a Turkish, a Kurdish state? I don't know.
Yeah, because it was saying the amount of people that got killed in their interactions.
Almost 40,000. That was what the Americans were saying.
Of what the PKK killed?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The numbers that I focused on was not that high when I was reading that thing.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was small.
It's the initial
2 people here, 70 people injured. You know, it didn't seem like it was like a ginormous group of people, but that group of people is influencing how everybody else is viewing them.
Well, yeah, and so it's a terrible situation.
Yeah,
I get it. If I was a Kurd, I would want Kurdistan. Mm-hmm. Now I'm not going to join the PKK because I'm not a terrorist. Mm-hmm. If you're going to kill somebody, you should kill people who are trying to go after you. You don't kill civilians in a village.
Yeah.
And you don't destroy the relationship with a state that you're in an armed conflict with when they have your leader and they say, hey, okay, let's talk this out. You don't turn around and start killing people. You can sit down at the table and have discussions. What in the world? So to me, it looks like, now you've got to really feel for these Kurds, man, because they've got this dream of having a nation, but then you've got these terrorist elements within your community who are at minimum giving people who do not want to award you sovereignty an excuse, and a very viable one. Sorry, it's a viable excuse. I don't know if the Turks really are afraid of the PKK. I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is that the PKK has afforded these people enough of an excuse to continue this and continue this narrative, unfortunately.
And where Kurdish forces have been integral in the battle against ISIS. In 2011, as protests were spreading across Syria, the government granted around 300,000 undocumented Kurds citizenship that was stripped back in 1962. But Syria's Kurds are seeking a federal system in the country similar to Iraqi Kurdistan's autonomous position. As for the Americans, while they've supported the Kurds throughout the decades, they don't actually support a Kurdish state. According to the official line, a Kurdish state in Iraq where the movement is the strongest would mean further destabilization of a vital U.S. ally. But its closest ally in the region, Israel, has actually been vocally supportive of an independent Kurdish state. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sees Kurdistan as a potential ally for Israel in a region where it feels surrounded by, well, not that many allies. So what is the likelihood of there being a Kurdish state anytime soon or at all? Well, according to Hawais, not too likely.
Kurds have realized without seeking support from the regional and international power, it's almost impossible to build a state, especially that Kurdistan is a small region and it's landlocked, surrounded by hostile countries. So for that, it's very difficult to build a state without building a strong diplomatic apparatus.
It's also worth noting that not all Kurdish populations follow the Iraqi Kurdish movement for independence per se.
When you look at other parts of Kurdistan, for instance, the Turkish part, the Syrian part, in those parts too, Kurdish nationalist movement is not asking for independence actually. They are seeking a solution within the existing borders. So they are trying to democratize the state so that Kurds would have a favorable environment.
And as Akiji also says, that lack of political cohesion is because of weak leadership.
It has a lot to do with the fragmentation of the Kurdish society along tribal, regional and linguistic lines. And again, the inability of the Kurdish leadership to bring all the segments together to create one voice, which would carry the Kurds to a nationhood.
The Kurds have a long history of not only marginalization, but of resisting that marginalization. But given how the Kurdistan region is surrounded by hostile countries, lacks political cohesion, and even agreement on the nation's future, it's not very likely that the world's largest nation without a state will be getting one anytime soon.
So here is what I've got so far. I've got a bunch of Kurds in Iraq who are like, yep, we want to carve out our own state in Iraq. Give us Iraq. But the majority of them do not want to do it through violence. They wanted to do it through a democratic process where they were able to say, hey, Let's do
Could've
this.
voted.
Here is the Kurdish president. Now, again, the irony here is this guy is the president of Kurdistan in Iraq, but it's still Iraq. I don't think people realize what's happening here. It's like you've got 50 states in America, and then California and Texas and Colorado and Arizona decide that they're gonna be this confederation, and then they elect a president, and they say, okay, I am the president of Calorexis, and we had a vote. Like, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Now again, it's an oversimplification, but I want you to understand this contextually here. Here is the Kurdish president talking about the referendum, the vote.
لماذا قرر الاستفتاء؟ لأنه فشلت كل المحاولات السابقة.
Iraqi Kurds are constitutionally a part of the country, but they function as a semi-autonomous entity. They have their own parliament and their own armed forces, the Peshmerga, who have been at the forefront of the fight against ISIL. In fact, they've proven to be better fighters than the Iraqi army itself. For example, in 2014, the Iraqi army fled an ISIL attack in Mosul,
That's what I said.
while Peshmerga fighters stood their
That's
ground.
what I said, Jack.
Iraq's Kurdish region also occupies parts of the country that are bursting with oil and gas. The Kurds sell these resources pretty much independently of Baghdad. So virtually a state within a state, but with aspirations for a truly independent state separate from Iraq.
Okay, so here's what we have. You have this state within a state. It's mind-boggling to me. You have this state within a state that has its own economy, its own parliament, its own military. And they've got their economic. They're selling stuff. Independent of Baghdad, which means again, it's you've got a state operating within a sovereign state that does not care what the other sovereign state has to say, and it's obvious why, because the Peshmerga are real live gangsters, and the Iraqi military has the dubious sort of tag of being the most cowardly military of the last 100 years.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I didn't know that.
hey, these guys get mocked incessantly. You wouldn't. I'll tell you some stuff off camera. You wouldn't believe. So, so there's almost this kind of tension there because you know that the Iraqis don't like it, but it's almost like they don't really want any real smoke with these guys because it would be a bloody conflict.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of Kurds are not terrorists. They're not the PKK people. They're not people who are going to go and do that. But at the same time, you're not going to want to poke the bear. So there's kind of this like uneasy tension there. So that's what's happening in Iraq. Well, what they said about Syria and Turkey. What's interesting is that Turkey has, according to this thing, the most Kurds in their community. Yeah. Which is another very interesting point because if this is genocide, the Turks don't have to go to Syria to commit genocide if they want to kill all the Kurds because most of the Kurds in the world reside in Turkey.
Right.
What a silly thing to say. So that's what's happening in Turkey. But here in Iraq, but what's happening in Turkey and Syria, according to the Al Jazeera report we just saw, was that people in Syria and Turkey are saying, well, wait a second, we don't need to carve out a separate nation. Let's just have let's join their democracy. Let's get some representatives in Turkey and in Syria that represent our interests, and then we can all do it as one state. We can still maintain our national integrity. We just don't need to create this division. And I'm sure the Turks have are tired of fighting us, and I'm sure that Syria is tired of fighting. So let's join their government. So the Kurds in Iraq are saying we're going to carve out our own thing, but the Kurds in Turkey and Syria, for the most part, are saying, we don't need to do that. So this is an extremely complex situation. And the idea that 1,000 United States troops are going to solve this problem is mind-boggling to me. Furthermore, the idea that the Turks are trying to ethnically cleanse the region of Kurds is ridiculous. The vast majority of the Kurds alive on the planet Earth live in Turkey. So they don't need to do that. Hitler, he cleared out the German Jews before he went to Poland.
Yep.
So if you want to actually cleanse the region of those people, you start at home.
There, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What a silly thing to say. It's not, and again, there's a real estate agent guy talking about they're going to get slaughtered. What are you talking about? You think that this guy can go and just completely ethnically cleanse all the Kurds in Turkey and in Syria, and the Peshmerga is just going to sit there and let that happen? Come on, man. And do you really believe that 1,000 U.S. soldiers would stop that from happening if they really wanted to do that? Do you think that when Hitler was out there clearing out those Jews, if we sent 1,000 Allied troops, that would have stopped the Blitzkrieg and the SS soldier? Are you serious? Have we read any history whatsoever? Is anybody reading anything before we start throwing out all these crazy terminologies? Look, we are the media. And all of us are accountable for what we're throwing out into the ether.
Yep.
So this is not 1999 when you could say some craziness by yourself. Everything that we all say now affects us on a macro level, and we've got to be very careful and very precise in what we're talking about here.
Yep. We share posts that we don't know anything about.
Now here's something that pops in my head, right? If we really, really wanted to end this conflict, what needs to happen then, because it's clear to me that the only time that these people are going to stop is if they get their own state, right?
Yeah.
Well, what's standing in the way of these people getting their own state is Iraq and Iran. So if you really, really want to help the Kurdish people, and if you really want an end to the conflict, there is no way to negotiate with the PKK. That's clear. That's obvious. The Turks have already tried and failed, according to the U.S. State Department, as recently as 2017. So the only way to stop this type of jihad is to carve out a place and say, okay, that is Kurdistan. Well, then that would mean then that the first invasion in Iraq and the second invasion in Iraq was a good thing, right? Isn't that true? Because that resulted in the death of Saddam Hussein, who targeted all those Kurds. But I thought that we were all in agreement, looking back, hindsight being 2020, that the invasion in Iraq was a horrible, horrible decision. Wasn't Barack Hussein Obama, wasn't that what he was campaigning on? This is what would happen in 2008. Hillary would say, you're inexperienced. And Barack would say, well, yeah, you had all this experience, but then you brought us into Iraq.
Voters need to judge us on the judgments we've made and the lessons we've learned. Senator Clinton has said her vote has not said that her vote was a mistake. She has simply blamed the civilian and military leaders who carried out the policy she authorized. If we don't know why Iraq met her threshold for war, how can we know what that threshold will be in the future?
And she had no response, because that was the major talking point, was Iraq was a horrible decision. But wait a second, if we really, really want to stop this conflict, the only way to really stop this conflict is to establish Kurdistan. Well, guess what? Look what I found. Look what I found in the New York Times. This is almost I'm sorry, the Atlantic. The Iraq War was a good idea, if you ask the Kurds. Isn't that interesting? So you could say, oh, Vin, your logic is silly, that's silly logic. No, it's actually pretty consistent. Because again, that's the only way that these folks are going to be happy. And look, I'm not mad at them for that. You want a homeland. Look, the Israelis got it. The Israelis figured out a way to make it happen. The Palestinians haven't been able to do it, and the Kurds haven't figured out a way to do it. So I'm not mad at them for wanting their own land. But the only way to truly do that is if we get involved on a large scale and force these countries to give you Kurdistan.
Yeah.
That's why they're saying, well, the Iraq war thing wasn't a bad idea. They liked it. They appreciated it because it furthered their agenda. These are very, very intelligent people.
Yep.
Here is an excerpt from that article. There's too much to read here, but I wanted to read it.
Denise Natali, an Iraq expert at the National Defense University in Washington, is a vocal critic of what she calls the love affair between the Kurdish regional government and the United States. Our special treatment of Iraqi Kurdistan only further fractures Iraq, and a unified country is still the U.S. policy. The Kurds were very reliable allies, she told me.
There was complicity between the U.S. forces and Peshmerga, and they were extremely helpful, but this is not a state. And quasi-states thrive off of weak central governments, because she's saying Kurdistan is not really a state. After the invasion, the U.S. turned a blind eye to the Peshmerga as they took over disputed territories, picking up pieces of a shattered Iraq, a move Natalie considers one of the most serious mistakes made by American forces, end quote. So what I'm saying is, look, us sending a measly 1,000 troops over there in Syria is not going to stop this conflict. Those troops are going to be there world without end. Amen. The only way to really stop that conflict is to give those people Kurdistan. That's the only way. And that's why, to this day, you ask any American now in 2019, now this article was written in 2014, but you ask any 2013. You ask any American, was the Iraq invasion a good thing? And they will, to a man and a woman, tell you, no, that was terrible. It was the worst thing we've ever done as a country. And I agree with them. But not the Peshmerga. They think that was a good thing. It was a great thing. Why? Because they know what I just told you. They're not going to be happy until they establish Kurdistan as an actual viable state. That's why. So I want to know, is it, if you say that Donald Trump is bad for vacating that area for the sake of the Kurds, that must then mean that you support what George Bush did because it absolutely benefited the Kurds. From the Kurds' own mouth, they've told you that.
It's one or the other.
It's one or the other. Either Bush was bad for going into Iraq and screwing that up, because you do realize that the horrible pictures of the dead people that we saw was Saddam doing that to the Kurds. So were we right to do that or not? Don't you remember? It changed. Now, you weren't following the news, but I had an obvious vested interest in it. It changed. It initially was, we're going there to get the WMDs because they're going to hurt us. And then it changed to, we are freedom fighters. We're liberators. That's what it turned into. It went from shock and awe to hearts and minds. The narrative changed. Once everybody said, well, crap, there's no WMDs here. Then the narrative changed to, well, this guy's an evil dictator. He's killing all these Kurds.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Mr. President. My name is Tara Mosa. I'm an American Iraqi Kurd. I would like to salute you and salute all the troops of freeing 27 million people. They are free.
Thank you.
And everybody who is questioning what happened to the chemical weapons. Saddam burned 4,500 villages. I lost more than 10 members of my family underground. We found their bones after when we freed Iraq. Saddam himself and his people, his followers, they are chemical weapons. Please stop questioning the administration and their decision. It was the best decision anybody could take.
And it was a leftist that were calling BS on that.
Yep.
They were saying that's BS. You told us it was about WMDs in our interest. That's what leftists were saying. Now leftists are telling us, oh, we need to stay there and keep fighting for these people. Okay, then that means that we did a good thing going into Iraq. Then you can't have it both ways. And this is not me saying this. This is an expert, and this is the people themselves saying it. You can't have it both ways. No, I think Bush was wrong to bring us to Iraq, and I think Trump is right to get us out of there. It's not our conflict. We didn't start it. And there are no defenseless, innocent people there in the sense of who the actors are. The PKK are not defenseless.
Right.
They're not defenseless people. Peshmerga are obviously not, I know for a fact, they're not defenseless people. So, here's something we have to understand. In every single war, there will always, 100% of the time, be innocent civilians who die. That's why you do everything you possibly can to avoid war. I am not saying that there are no innocent Kurds dying. Of course there are. But we've also seen that there are innocent Turks that have died because of this stuff. There are innocents on both sides. What I do not see is a completely clean party and a completely dirty one.
Right.
And to be honest with you, it's a little bit weighted toward the Turkish side. Because I understand what they're doing. Somebody comes into your country and does that crap. Look, they killed 3,000 of our people.
Yeah.
And we have massacred millions of people on the strength of those 3,000 people. Okay? And one of those targets was an actual military. The Pentagon is a military target. So the folks that died in the Pentagon are not innocent civilians. They died in an act of war. And I'm saying that as a person who lost a family member in 9/11. But let's cut it straight. Let's be as precise as we possibly can. The folks who died in the Pentagon died in an act of war. The folks who died in the train towers in Flight 93 died as an act of terrorism. That's how you slice it. And that is exactly what has happened to the Turkish people, and that is exactly what has happened to the Kurdish people because of the instigations of the PKK. Because of the unrest that was created by the chopping up of the land of the Europeans in France and the UK respectively, who were decidedly quiet.
Yep.
Send 500 French troops and 500 UK troops down there if you want 1,000 people. Keep America out of it. And here's the other thing about American involvement. Don't you realize that we just sent 30 pine nut farmers into eternity about 3 weeks ago in Afghanistan? Have we not this is more than just we're not the world police. This is we're the world bully.
Right.
We bully people. We kill people. And it doesn't matter to us. We just go along with our day. We're blowing these people to smithereens. I don't want America over there. Not so much because I'm as worried about the troops. I am, but I'm also worried about the people the troops will kill. Particularly our Air Force. What in the world? Alright, so this is what's happening. Now, in my research I found the following. This is a man named Abdullah Al-Jabasini. He wrote an article for the group that's devoted to developing peace in conflicted areas, and it's entitled Civil Resistance to Military Conscription in Kurdish Areas of Northern Syria, The Untold Story. Now that piqued my interest. So I said, okay, well, let's check this out, especially considering Syria is headline news here. This briefing, here's the quote directly from the big homie himself. This briefing uses a concept of social contract to investigate how Kurdish civilians resisted the military conscription imposed by the Kurdish de facto political order in northern Syria, which the Democratic Union Party, PYD, an offshoot of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK, established. It aims to show that Kurdish individuals and families did not primarily flee their homes because of warfare, but fled because of the PYD's armed wings compulsorily taking adults and youngsters from working schools to checkpoints and front lines.
Oh my gosh.
While this briefing focuses on civil resistance against forced conscription by the PYD in Syria, it should be noted that the same phenomenon was documented across the border in where? Turkey, for instance, in Diyarbakir, Turkey, the recruitment of minors by the PKK led to sit-ins by Kurdish families. End quote. Do you see what happened there? Wow. In 2014, the Kurds in northern Syria created this mandatory self-defense duty thingamajiggy, which was basically a draft.
Oh, yeah.
And they were forcing people to join their army.
Yeah, but it's even worse than the draft. Like, they're just snatching you out of your... Did it say school and work?
Yeah.
They just snatched... So your son went to school and now he's gone.
Now he's a jihadist.
That's crazy.
And who are the players? The PKK, again.
Wow.
And they were not satisfied to do this in northern Syria. They also crossed the border into another sovereign nation named Turkey and did it to the Turkish people.
Wow.
Hello? And this guy is saying that people were fleeing northern Syria not so much because of war, but because they didn't want their kids forcibly conscripted.
Yeah. Wow.
By the PKK.
Wow.
These are the people that are fighting in northern Syria right now. These are the people that I'm supposed to be afraid are going to get massacred. These people sound like pretty capable people to me. You know what happens? You need numbers.
Yep.
Hey man, we need 1,500 people. You only have 1,100 people. Okay, well go to that high school and snatch up 400 people. That's how you do it.
Jeez.
I don't want to fight. I want to study. I want to study engineering. I want to be an engineer. Yeah, you can be an engineer. Take this
Wow.
Kalashnikov, AK-47. These are these anarchists. These people, the PKK. They're Leninist anarchists.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just listen.
Wow.
This happens all the time. Did you not read Animal Farm? Some animals are more equal than others.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell can you reconcile being an anarchist while at the same time forcing somebody to march in your military? It might be that you didn't consider human nature. Okay, well, so this guy, he write this, and this guy's a PhD student, this Jabasini guy. And so I said, I wanted to take the biblical principle of the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, one guy says it,
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I need to see it more than just one person.
Mm-hmm.
So here's The Nation. The Nation is an outlet. And by the way, I went to allsides.com and I specifically looked at what the leanings of The Nation are.
Mm-hmm.
And they lean left. This is a leftist outlet, according to All Sides. Okay, so don't come at me with it. I got this from a leftist source. So here's The Nation. This was written in 2017, by the way, which is also the same year that the U.S. State Department published the document stating that the PKK is a terrorist organization. Here's The Nation, a left-leaning outlet. This is what they said in 2017. Go ahead.
Erbil, Iraq. The raid began at 3 a.m. in a Syrian village close to the Iraqi border. Kurdish-led military police, many masked, piled out of their pickup trucks, set up roadblocks, drew their weapons, and launched a house-to-house search. It was America's favorite Syrian militia, the People's Protection Units, or YPG, at work. Top figures in the Obama administration and even the professional military praised the YPG as the most effective Syrian force against the Islamic State or ISIS. The Trump administration hasn't yet indicated how it plans to work with the YPG, but its mission last September 10th was nothing to brag about. The northeast Syrian village being stormed, Bani Shkawi, is Kurdish, and the Asayish, or military police, were not scouring for radical Islamists, but for the Kurdish draft dodgers. They arrested 7 young men, but many others got away, local residents said. 2 weeks later, the Asayish returned with a force of 700. When a group of young men took flight, the Asayish opened fire, killing Hani Kanjar, an 18-year-old Kurd. They captured 3 young men, but set them free since they were under 18. Jeez.
So here's this guy, this PhD guy, student, going for telling us that these guys are forcing conscriptions and that people are fleeing because they're worried about conscriptions. And here's The Nation in 2017, same thing. At gunpoint. Can you imagine?
Wow. No.
I got a 14-year-old son, and he could have been killed because they didn't turn these kids away until they figured out, well, crap, they're under 18.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Which means they might have killed some of them that were under 18.
These are the people.
Terrible.
These are the people I'm supposed to worry about. What the Turks are going to do with them? Now, again, I'm worried about Kurdish civilians, but it seems to me that the Kurdish civilians are also worried about the Kurds and the PKK.
Yep.
Now, just FYI, the YPG is simply the Syrian arm of the PKK. So the PKK is doing all that craziness in Turkey. The YPG is doing craziness in Syria.
Okay.
So you got PKK in Turkey, YPG in Syria, and Peshmerga in Iraq.
But they're all the Kurds.
They're all Kurds.
Yeah.
But they all have different. But the Peshmerga are different. They're not going out there and trying to initiate conflicts with other sovereign states. They're just kind of.
Yeah.
They're fighting ISIS, and they're like, don't mess with Kurdistan. We're good. But these guys, I mean, how can you possibly justify this?
Oh yeah.
The real question should be, why were we working with these people in the first place? That's the question. But of course, Obama had no problem working with these people because Obama was working with Al Qaeda during the Arab Spring in Libya. Who do you think killed Gaddafi? That was Al Qaeda with help from us and CIA. Well done, guys. Job well done. So Obama had no problem with working with terrorist outlet. That's clear. He did it with Al Qaeda, and he clearly did it here with the YPG. Even though his own State Department was calling the PKK a terrorist organization. Yeah. Was this an act of terrorism? Yes or no? Unbelievable. Does this kid? You probably don't know his name. I'm going to say his name again because we're crying over the dad who lost the daughters, and rightly so. But here is a young man who was killed because all he wanted to do was go to school. That's all he wanted. He wanted to go to school. He didn't want to be a fighter. He wasn't no warrior. So all he wanted to do was go to school. And your friends over there in the YPG killed him because he had the audacity to want to go. His name was Hani Kanjer, 18 years old. Kurd. Killed by who? A Turkish person? No, he's killed by a Kurd.
Wow.
So here we go. Let's just jump into a conflict that we know nothing about.
Yeah.
That we know nothing about the complexities of, that we cannot even begin to understand. And I learned a very important lesson one time in New York City, man. I moved to I moved to Brooklyn. I moved from the Bronx to Brooklyn. And I befriended this guy. And so when you're friends with somebody in the hood, you got to roll with them, right? And so we're playing basketball, and this dude starts talking crap to him and whatever. And I said, "Yo, man, next time you say something, I'm gonna get at you." And he's like, "Word." So he throws the ball at my friend. So I go and I shove this dude against the fence. Out of nowhere, bang! I turn around, it's my friend. He's like, "Yo, that's my brother, man." See, I wasn't from the area. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was jumping into something that I knew nothing about. Those two are brothers. Brothers fight like that all the time. It just so happens that they did not introduce themselves to me.
Oh gosh.
So I walked away with an eye jammy. Very confused. That's what's happening here. You got these idealistic young American people that sit behind and never held a weapon in their life. Don't know what it's like to be away from their families for months on end with no sign of anything. Don't know what it's like to lose a friend and not believe that he died for any real positive reason. None of y'all know what that's like. But here you are saying that these guys should stay in that situation in the middle of this gigantic mess. And who should they be fighting for? Should they be fighting for the Peshmerga? Well, they don't need to fight for the Peshmerga. They can handle their own business. Should they be fighting for the PKK and the YPG? Why? They're terrorists themselves who go after innocent little kids who are trying to educate themselves. Should they go after Turkey? Why should they go after Turkey? What has Turkey done to us? You know what happens when you go and you swear in? You swear to defend this country against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Turkey is not my enemy. Neither is the YPG, neither is the PKK. They better stay over there. You should stay over there, and they will, because they know not to mess with America. These people have done nothing to us. The Turks have done nothing to us. Well, why do we need to get involved? This is not like what they did with the Armenians. This is not that. As you can see, this is clearly a different situation. Good God. So I'm continuing. And here's the thing. So they let this kid go because he was under 18 years old. And I said, okay, well, that's good. That's good. And then I read this. The SNHR is basically a Syrian human rights watch group. SNHR has also reported extensive forced recruitment of child soldiers, adolescents under 16.
Wow.
Some 1,876 children were forcibly recruited between 2012 and 2015. Children have been forced to use and train on guns since 2012 extensively, SNHR has said. Both the Pentagon and the State Department declined to respond to questions from the nation.
Wow.
Again, this is written in 2017. So this is the Obama administration is pretty much gone, and then Trump is inheriting this stuff. The YPG agreed in writing in 2014 to halt the recruiting of underage soldiers. According to Geneva Call, an NGO that lobbies armed groups to adhere to international norms in war, as of late 2015, 214 children under 16 had been demobilized, and 49 others between 16 and 17 has been discharged from military service, the group said in a report early last year, according to YPG
I'm kind of
officials.
surprised. If that's actually true, I'm surprised.
Well, what this means is this is a tacit admission from the YPG that they use child soldiers. These are the people I'm supposed to be worried about? These people that are recruiting child soldiers?
Oh my gosh.
These are the people. The people that are shooting kids who are trying to go to high school. And people who are recruiting young child soldiers. These are the innocent, hapless victims who are going to get slaughtered, according to my friend, the real estate agent. The guy's not really my friend. I don't know him from Adam. But I probably know more about him than he knows about the situation. You're whining about people who kill kids, their own people who forcibly recruit. It's not even recruitment. You're dragging people away at gunpoint to fight in your war when there could be a peaceful option, when the vast majority of the people in Turkey and Syria, the vast majority of Kurds want peace. They want a one-state solution where they can have representation in the government. That's what they want. If you want a separate Kurdistan, go to Iraq because the Peshmerga's there, go do that. But that's not enough for you. You want Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. That's what's happening here. And you saw this in the Peshmerga is not completely innocent either, because they said when we turned a blind eye to them scooping up all this land.
Yep.
So when they took, it's kind of this weird thing when it says that the Iraqi government came and took Kirkuk. How can you take Kirkuk when Kirkuk is part of Iraq?
Yeah.
Unless the Peshmerga took Kirkuk for themselves. Do you see what's happening here? Now, I hope that the most of you are just confused because there's so many moving parts here and so many things that... Exactly. And putting American troops on the ground is not going to solve this problem.
Right.
Good God. Here's The Nation. They did a two-part piece. And it's called, this is a very provocative title, Have the Syrian Kurds Committed War Crimes? Please note, this is published 2017. Okay? And here's an excerpt from that article.
At least 300,000 Syrian Kurds have fled the region to neighboring Iraqi Kurdistan, according to officials there. And
so that's Iraqi Kurdistan is where the Peshmerga are.
Yeah.
So they're fleeing. Syrian Kurds are running away from Syria to Iraqi Kurdistan. Makes a lot of sense.
According to the officials there, and no fewer than 200,000 have fled to Turkey rather than submit to forced conscription and political suppression by a group that insists on ruling as one-party state, according to Kurdish human rights monitors in Turkey. Officials in Iraqi Kurdistan say that if the Syrian Kurdish militia opened the borders, at least half of the Kurdish population under its control would flee.
Stop right there.
Wow.
Did you catch that? 200,000 people, Kurdish people, are fleeing their home to Turkey to get away from Kurds. Wait a second. I thought the Turks were out there trying to genocide these people. Then why in the world were they running to them? You know, it's like when Salahuddin, when the Jews are fleeing from the Christian crusaders. And they were scared to death, and Salahuddin says, "We are not those men." Famous quote. Yeah, and Muslims are so horrible, they're so terrible, and they hate Jews so much. And why the hell were the Jews fleeing? They were running for their lives, literally, from the Christians, our team, to the safety of the Muslims. And here are these Kurds running like mad, away from other Kurds to the safety of Turkey. That's why when we were watching Al Jazeera on the drive up, the Erdogan was saying, well, okay, Europe says you have so many problems with us doing whatever. How about we open the borders and you can take all the 2.6 million refugees we've taken, many of whom are Kurds. How about that? Good night. I mean, this is mind-boggling stuff. This is mind-boggling stuff. How jacked up does the situation have to be that your own people are so
fleeing.
afraid of you? You've made their lives a living hell to such a degree that they would rather go to Turkey than live with you.
Yeah.
Which, of course, makes a ton of sense because the vast majority of Kurds, once again, live in Turkey. So this makes complete and total sense why they would do so. But this characterization, oh, the Kurds are going to be slaughtered if we pull out. Really? What were the 1,000 troops that we had over there in the region? Because we've always had folks in theater in Iraq. I mean, these people are next door neighbors. What did they do to protect these people? Who is going to protect the Kurds from the Kurds? You know, there's all this meltdown. This is such a terrible country. I hate my country. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, come on, bro. Come on, dude. Have you read? Do you? It's a serious question. Do you know about this? Do you know that 200,000 of these people fled to the supposed genocidal maniacs over there in Turkey because they're scared to death that their 18-year-old son, they got a 15-year-old son that's pretty smart, pretty good at math, wants to be a mathematician, can't do it because he's got some crazy PKK person out there trying to recruit him, forced by at gunpoint to do jihad? Do you care about any of these people at all? Or are you just so busy with your ideology and your communism and your anti-Trumpism that you can't see that 300,000 plus 200,000 is 500,000 people have been so terrorized and displaced by these people? And the Kurds in Turkey themselves say that half the Kurdish population would flee if the terrorists that go by the name of Kurdish PKK and YPG, if they would let these people have free range of movement, which is supposed to be an anarchist principle, if they'd actually apply their anarchism, half the Kurdish population would be gone. Do you care about those people at all? Or you want to trot this guy out who unfortunately lost his daughter so that you can use him as a chess piece to make your argument? Have you looked at any of this stuff? Do you care about these people at all? Or is it you're just so bent in your ideology that you don't understand what's happening to actual human beings? There's definitely a human rights atrocity happening in that area for sure. Now look what Obama did. The Obama administration insisted that the PKK, listed by the United States as a terrorist group, is separate from the YPG. So it's like the PKK, why? They're completely different because we don't work with terrorists.
Wow.
Forget about what we did in Libya. Forget about what we did in Egypt. Forget about supporting Jabhat al-Nusra. We don't work with terrorists. Okay, that's okay. Sure. Okay, so then so look what they said. They said, we asked a couple, including numerous witnesses, including 4 PKK defectors, interviewed in this article, called the U.S. stance a fiction. Is there a YPG separate from the PKK? The Nation asked Mohar, a PKK defector, interviewed outside of Syria. What's the difference? He replied. That's a rhetorical question. Answer none. Now this guy's a defector. What he's saying is, there's no functional difference between YPG and PKK. The same people. It's just different places. Well, he's a defector. So you can only take what the man says with a grain of salt. He defected for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So that's my point. I'm applying the Brooklyn principle. I don't know. so I'm not going to go push this guy.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if he's telling the truth. Neither do you. What I do know is that 500,000 people have ran for their lives. That's what I know. And 200,000 of them ran to Turkey. How do you think those 200,000 people feel about what the Turks are doing right now? You think that they're sad about what the Turks are doing right now? What do you think? If you were so terrorized that you had to flee your country and take residence in a visiting country, and then that country went and started killing the people that did that to you, how would you feel about it?
I'd be very happy.
Unbelievable. And as with any oppressive regime, there is the attack on the press. Again, we're in The Nation. This was published 2017. It says the following. In 2013, Sadun Sino began working for Orient TV, an opposition news outlet in Rojava. After reporting on a series of assassinations of Kurdish opposition figures, all of which he believed were carried out by the PYD operatives, Sino began regular coverage of protests which usually erupted when the YPG seized an underage boy or girl. Imagine that. Sino said he produced at least 15 reports from his hometown of Derbasi, and other reports in Armuda and Kobani produced even more. The YPG staged so many roundups in Derbasi that I lost count, Sino said. People came to me asking me to report on it, he pointed out. He reported on the conscription of girls, at least 2 of whom were underage, and on PKK arrests of young men and women at checkpoints. On one day in 2014, they took 40 men and boys at one checkpoint, Sino said. It was happening every day. On another day, the YPG issued an order to round up 150 conscripts. Finally, the authorities cracked down on the news coverage. They told me that I either give up on journalism or leave, or they will kill me. Sino told The Nation after being jailed 4 times, he fled Rojava in January 2015. Jason Stern, a researcher with the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists until last week, said CPJ has found that censorship and arrests are routine in Rojava. Too often the authorities there get glowing coverage for their role in fighting the Islamic State, and as a result, their regular practice of censorship is ignored, Stern observed in an email. That's all we've heard about the YPG and the PKK and all these. All we hear is that they fought ISIS. Well, that's great. I'm glad that they fought ISIS. But please tell me how much different they are than ISIS. Now, sure, they're not making sport of beheading people on camera, but you're locking up journalists, you're threatening to kill them. Isn't that the entire point of journalism? Is that the journalist holds those in power accountable? Why, oh why, would a group want to suppress journalism? I mean, it's so amazing. People in America can rightly point out when Trump says that the press is the enemy of the people. They rightly point out how dangerous that type of rhetoric is. So Trump rightly doesn't get a pass when he says craziness like that. But then when these guys are actually jailing people, kidnapping them, and threatening to murder them for daring to report on their atrocities, that's somehow okay. All right. Journalists have been routinely detained for days at a time and then released, each incident sending a clear message to other journalists, Stern said. Media affiliated with other parties of the Syrian opposition are targeted for censorship. And he noted that the PYD withdrew the license of 2 major news outlets in August 2015, the KRG-based Radar news agency and the Syrian opposition station Orient TV. Both were banned permanently in February 2016, according to Saeed Omar Khalil, a human rights lawyer in Erbil, the KRG capital. But this is only part of the picture of repression. In its annual human rights report last year, the State Department, quoting Kurdish activists and press reporting, said the PYD and the YPG violently suppressed freedom of assembly and severely limited freedom of speech in areas under their control. I will say that again. Quoting Kurdish activists and press reporting, the U.S. State Department said in its annual human rights report that the PYD and the YPG violently suppressed freedom of assembly and severely limited freedom of speech in areas under their control. In the past 2 years, at least 8 journalists have been abducted or arrested, according to Kurd Watch, a Berlin-based watchdog group. It reported a case in early 2015 where a journalist from the website of a news outlet affiliated with the Kurdish Unity Party was abducted by the Asayish military police, beaten with iron bars, and had a finger cut off. Lawyer Khalil gave the nation a list of 57 political activists who had been arrested through last September. Among them was Yunus Assad, the head of the town council in Amuda, who was kidnapped, beaten, and tortured in May 2016. These are the people that are fighting Turkey as we speak. The SDF is composed mostly of YPG, PKK folks, and some other disparate groups, but they're the majority of the people fighting right now belong to these organizations. Now again, I think there are probably lots of people stuck in that situation right now who don't want to be there. And so I hope that Turkey exercises restraint. Now, I'm not very hopeful that Turkey will exercise restraint because, again, this is the Middle East. This is literally the exact same thing when we went into Afghanistan. You may not remember this, but there was a group called the Northern Alliance. And we linked up with the Northern Alliance. We had Green Beret elements. We had Delta operators who linked up with the Northern Alliance in order to crush the Taliban because they had been fighting the Taliban for decades. And then we showed up. And it was clear that there were massive human rights atrocities, massive killings of Taliban leaders and their families in mass graves for retaliation. So in the Middle East, when you have these blood feuds, I am certain that there are going to be many people caught up in the crossfire, and I don't believe that the Turkish government is going to be very discriminating against YPG soldiers. They're not going to say, well, were you forced into it or not? They're just going to kill them. I understand that, and that's a horrible tragedy. But again, this is not on America. This is... it is, I'll say this, it is on America in the sense that we allied with these people. So from that perspective, that is our fault. But as far as the repercussions of these activities, again, I'm just going to say this to you. The State Department is quoting Kurds. The State Department was quoting Kurdish activists who were saying the YPG and the PYD were suppressing freedom and jailing people and threatening people and cutting off people's body parts. Kurds were saying this. You can't say, oh, this is propaganda from Turkey or whatever. Their own people are saying this. Is there any wonder why they're all fleeing for their lives? Wouldn't you? The article also talks about how the YPG used the conflict with ISIS as an excuse to relieve a bunch of Arabs from their homes and villages. Entire homes and villages, according to this report in The Nation, have been uprooted. This article exposes the fact that the YPG and PKK were using the war against ISIS as a pretext to relieve Arabs of their homes. It reads, another missing element in the war against ISIS is agreed war aims. The United States has been wary of the YPG's political agenda ever since a negative experience. Listen how this gets characterized. A negative experience in June 2015 when the militia captured the town of Tal Abyad from ISIS, kicked out or kept out the mostly Arab population, and then proceeded to Kurdify the town.
Wow.
It is now called Giri Spi in Kurdish. So they used
negative experience.
They used the war with ISIS as a pretext to go take over this town.
Wow.
And by the way, I just saw on the news 1,000 ISIS captives have escaped. So they had these guys, and they were saying it. They're like, look, we're not going to be able to hold these ISIS captives, man. They've been using ISIS from the beginning. When it was we had a common enemy, it's like, look, we're fighting ISIS. It's great. Don't pay attention to the fact we're taking all this land from these people and destroying their villages. Hey, we're fighting ISIS. And then when they want support, they say, hey, I don't know what's going to happen to these ISIS people. I mean, if how do you let 1,000 ISIS prisoners escape? Really, YPG. You know what's interesting? When that boy tried to escape, they were able to gun him down. They were able to gun that kid down. But 1,000 ISIS terrorists who chop people's heads off on camera, somehow they were able to escape, and y'all couldn't do nothing to stop them? Sounds to me like you guys are brilliant people who are adept at manipulating people.
Yep.
That's what it looks like to me.
That is what it looks like.
Now all of a sudden you can't keep track of these 1,000 people. I'm seeing all these people on Facebook. Oh, this is on Trump. This is on Trump. And nobody stops to think, how the hell did that happen? I mean, this is the Middle East.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how things function in the Middle East, right? I mean, think about it. At minimum, you would assume that these guys would say, okay, we gotta blitz all these people. Right?
Oh, yeah.
How much you want to bet that some YPG or PKK scumbag opened the lock and sent those people out? How were there even 1,000 ISIS prisoners in the first place unless you had them as an insurance policy? Because you're playing the long game.
Yep.
People are so simple. Oh man, that's Trump's fault. Really? So let me get this straight. If we had 1,000 U.S. troops at this border, that would have kept that 1,000. And isn't it interesting? We had 1,000 troops that left, and all of a sudden 1,000 ISIS people escaped.
Oh, I know.
Those are some very round. Those are some real round numbers. How simple are you? I'm not talking about the person because the person didn't mention that part about it. But I'm just looking at these people on Facebook. People who should know better. People who could be my father. You could be my father, and you're saying and uncritically just accepting this stuff. This stuff has been written about for years. In fact, the YPG has consistently stated that it intends to capture a band of mostly Arab territory across northern Syria in order to connect the self-styled Kurdish cantons in the cities of Kamishi and Kobani with Afrin. Turkey, the biggest power in the region, has vowed to stop the project. This was in 2017. These people vocalized that we're going to take over Arab land and Arab territory, and we're going to connect this entire thing and make one big giant Kurdistan. And the Turks said, no, you're not. This is in 2017. Is that Trump's fault too? Is Trump's fault? Fearing the PKK would link YPG-controlled land in northern Syria and predominantly Kurdish towns in southern Turkey, threatening Turkey's territorial integrity. You don't say. It's as if the YPG and the PKK are working in tandem. But Obama said that there's no correlation. Okay. In August, Turkey sent troops into Syria to prevent that from happening. The United States has disavowed the militia's goal of establishing the Kurdish corridor, but Washington has been unable to stop its moves on the ground. The YPG and Turkey have clashed repeatedly on Syrian soil. These people have been fighting since 2017, when these people articulated that they had explicit goals to take Arab territory. And they did it, according to eyewitnesses and defectors. Now, a person might say, well, those are defectors. Okay, fine. Here's Amnesty International.
Civilians living in areas of northern Syria under the de facto control of the autonomous administration led by
The PYD.
are being subjected to serious abuses that include forced displacement and home demolitions. The autonomous administration has failed to provide civilians with compensation for their losses or alternative housing. Many of the civilians who have lost their homes and properties have nowhere else to go. While some have sought refuge in southern Turkey, others are displaced in Syria at times, living in schools, camps, or with relatives. This report documents the deliberate demolition of civilian homes and the forced displacement of civilians, and in some instances, entire villages, by the autonomous administration, in particular its police and military wings. While the autonomous administration has claimed that its forced displacement of civilians was not arbitrary because it was necessary on military grounds or for the security or protection of local residents, this report documents cases in which there was no such justification. Amnesty International considers that these instances of forced displacement, demolitions, and confiscation of civilian property constitute war crimes. Wow.
It's Amnesty International.
Yeah.
These are war criminals. I'm supposed to send American soldiers to go and fight on behalf of war criminals
That's
against
crazy.
Turkey, an ally of the United States? Why would I do that? Look, like I said, by the end of this, you should be completely and totally confused. This is a gigantic mess. This is a human rights atrocity. You have people who are forcing, they're a minority in Turkey and they're a minority in Syria among the Kurds who want to establish a Kurdistan, a Kurdish corridor in the middle of other sovereign nations. And it is obvious that those other sovereign nations don't want it to happen, and neither do we, and neither do the vast majority of Kurds.
Right.
It is a small group of idealistic terrorists who are terrorizing that region. And when Erdogan says that these are terrorists, I agree with him. If you go out, I mean, they're beyond terrorists. Terrorists to me is like a little band of people who go around and, like, these guys are, look, there's a difference between Al-Qaeda, okay? Al-Qaeda does not want your house. They just want to kill you, period. Al-Qaeda just wanted to kill you and get you out of Saudi Arabia. You want to get the Kafarun out of the Holy Land. That was their goal. They were not trying to eat up all this land and take stuff from people. ISIS was different. They were trying to initiate the apocalypse. These people are not that. These people are trying their hand at a form of imperialism. That's what these people are, imperialists. They're not even, they're beyond just terrorists now. These are imperialists. And the idea that we're somehow betraying the Kurdish people because we pulled 1,000 troops out of this mess is crazy to me. This is madness. If you can look at all of this data and information, if you're still with us by the end of this, congratulations, you deserve a medal. But if you could look at all this information and really come to the conclusion that we should be there and that we should have 1,000 troops there and that we've done some horrible wrong, I don't know what else to tell you. Look, anytime there's a war, civilians are going to get hurt. I watched the video. I cried when I watched the video, which is not difficult to get me to cry over stuff like that. Everybody knows I'm very emotive when it comes to civilian deaths. Everybody knows that. They didn't sign up for that. But neither did the 18-year-old kid who got blown to smithereens and all the other people that we don't know about who are getting caught up in this conflict when all they want to do is live at peace. They do not want a Kurdistan in Syria, and they don't want one in Turkey. Let them live in peace. Let them send their sons to school. Let them be proud of their sons. The kid is 18 years old, 17 years old. He should be worrying about his report card. He should be worrying about finals. He should not be worrying about some psychopath, Leninist, so-called anarchist who cannot even stay consistent with their worldview, putting a gun to his head and making him go fight people he has no conflict with. The only thing a person could say about America is, why were you working with these bastards in the first place? That is a legitimate question. And I'm sorry, right-wingers, I'm sure many of you had a party, but the documentary on Saudi Arabia and what they've done to the Yemeni people is coming, because that actually qualifies as genocide. And because we are linked to them economically, that's what Trump said, that's okay. That's an actual genocide. This is not. This is not a genocide. Don't use that term about these people. This is not genocide. This is Turks saying, I'm not going to let you imperialize this region, you crazy people. So right-wingers, sorry, there's no moral standing for Trump here, because it's obvious that he's not pulling out for the right reasons, because he pulled out 1,000 and sent 2,000 over there. For what reason? Why? We will talk about that in the next documentary, but good Lord, this is a disaster. Look, if you're a praying person, you got to pray for the world, man. This is terrible stuff. And at the end of the day, when it comes to the gun violence, people say, I don't want to deal with any thoughts and prayers. Look, man, do you have a solution for this? What we just talked about in the last hour and a half? Tell me what your solution is. This is look, we're not shy about what we're about and what our worldview is. This is our worldview, and I think if there's any inkling in your mind, if you love these people, we got to find ways to help these people. And look, we welcome strident debate. People said some pretty crazy stuff, I thought, and I probably said some pretty crazy stuff. I'm fine with strident debate, but let's see if we can find some way to band together and help these people in this region. So if anybody has any ways of assisting these people, these Kurdish people, let us know. And I vow to you that we're absolutely we'll put our money where our mouth is to help these people, because this is an absolute disaster. It's heartbreaking. Anytime I see anything about a young kid dying, it kills me, because I'm watching my son grow up before my eyes, and I can't imagine it, man. No, can't imagine it. What these people are going through. Everybody's just trying to eke out a regular life, man. We're all trying to. Everybody basically wants the same things, and it's always a small group of people who screwed up for the rest of us. Anyway, love your neighbor.
Take care of each other.
Middle America.
We are the media.
Till next time, guys.